Well, Brian, tonight as we speak, lots of things happening. The process is accelerating. What it's going to lead to, I'm not sure. What do you think? What's going on and what's it leading to? For who?
Well, it's a great couple of days for Joe Biden. First of all, he won the South Carolina primary handily. And then 2 days later, he's gotten the endorsement of two of the latest dropouts, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. And he's also getting a nomination nod from Beto O'Rourke, who came very close to knocking off Ted Cruz in Texas. So there's three biggies on the same day, and they're all in Dallas as we record this piece, telling everybody that Biden's the man. And, you know, Biden has to be buoyed by that. The only wrinkle in any of this is the fact that so many people have already voted.
Yeah.
And that could present problems, especially for those candidates who dropped out.
Well, you know, how important really are the endorsements of the dropouts?
Well, I think, you know, it's better than having somebody taking snipes at you. And I think that that's important in this time because Trump is going to pull out all the stops against whoever the Democratic nominee is.
Well, more so than the endorsements, I think the importance of them closing ranks around him is that it focuses more support for Biden, where they're not all taking votes away from Biden. I mean, that's the real benefit now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and don't forget, you know, if some of these people who are going to vote Tuesday in Super Tuesday primaries are swayed by the fact that their candidate has dropped out, i.e. Mayor Pete or Amy Klobuchar, it gives them pause to think about who they are going to vote for. Even though there's been early voting in a lot of these states, there's still a lot of people who are going to vote Tuesday in hard places.
Well, yeah, and I mean, how much of a boost will this really give Biden over Sanders? I mean, what has changed now in the dynamic between Biden and Sanders?
Well, I don't think much has changed between the two of them yet. The only question is whether Biden's win and these endorsements can propel Biden to a higher spot on the polls. If indeed that works, then this is going to be a two-man race in no time at all.
Well, how do you think Biden and Sanders are going to do in Super Tuesday?
Well, I think Sanders is going to take the two big prizes, probably California and Texas. Whether he takes Texas by as much a margin as the polls indicate is going to be a big question. California, I think he's far enough ahead there, so it's unlikely that Biden would be able to catch him. But there's still a lot of other states where Biden is strong, North Carolina, Virginia, places like that. So you can't rule anything out at this point.
Well, actually, three dropouts. Tom Steyer, we forgot to mention, along with Buttigieg and Klobuchar. Now, where are those votes going? Are they necessarily going to Biden?
Well, I would think that Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar's votes are not going to go to Sanders. I don't see that happening at all. And I certainly don't think that Steyer is going to tell his people privately or even publicly that they should vote for Sanders. There's been too much non-identity with Sanders among the other candidates. Don't forget they went after him pretty good in the debate before the South Carolina primary. And I think you got to remember that Sanders is the outsider here, both in terms of political philosophy, and we get back to this thing I talked about earlier, and that is he refuses so far to join the Democratic Party. Now, as we talked about before we rolled the tape here today, if you waltzed into the Republican National Committee headquarters in Washington and told all the movers and shakers that you want to run for the Republican presidential nomination, but you don't want to run the party and join the party, they'd laugh you out of the room.
That's
And
that's pretty much what Trump did in 2016, did he not? I
but
mean,
he was a Republican.
well, sort.
He became a Republican. He became a registered Republican.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Sanders has not done that. And there's a lot of Democrats who spent a lot of time working in this party who would be really upset if this total outsider comes in and hijacks the nomination.
Well, the party apparatus may be upset by it, but the party establishment, the higher ups in the party. But what about the folks out there who are going to vote? I mean, I don't think they see that as such a mark against Sanders that he's not a real Democrat. Because don't forget, it was disillusionment with the Democrats that got Trump elected in 2016. Disillusionment among traditional Democrats who turned to Trump and abandoned the party because in turn they felt the party had abandoned them. So you're still going to have that kind of dynamic working this time around, as I see it.
Well, I think to a point, you're right. But don't forget, we've had 3 years of Trump's non-deliverances. And, those same people who were distraught with the Democrats, I think have come around full circle, as you saw in 2018, with 40 House seats in the pickup column. So I would say that any discontent that middle of the road Democrats and independents might have had with the Democratic Party, whether it was due to Hillary Clinton or the party in general, have long been on the mend.
See, the way I see it, Bryant, is quite differently. I see both Sanders and Trump as riding opposite ends of the political spectrum, but pretty much the same in terms of they have the attraction of an outsider who's upsetting the apple cart and is going to deliver the voters away from the failings of the two major political parties. So Sanders, I think, has that going for him more than Biden, because Biden is considered part of the Hillary gang, part of the Obama era, same old stuff that the voters were dissatisfied and voted away from in 2016, where Sanders is again the guy who's going to fix it, as Trump was promising to do. They're pretty much riding a popular wave of revolution against the establishment, just on opposite sides of the spectrum. So they both have that appeal, more so than Biden does.
Well, look, if you look at what voters have done in the same category at state levels, Connecticut elected Lowell Weicker as an independent governor. Maine elected Angus King as an independent governor. And it was very hard for them to govern. Not hard so much to get elected, but very hard to govern, because the parties still control the legislative branches, which is the same problem we have in Washington.
I agree that could be a big problem if Sanders gets in, that he won't be able to govern. He won't have support from either end of the aisle.
That's correct.
But what we're talking about now is who is the most electable. And I don't think it's necessarily Biden, because, they're both anti-establishment candidates. Trump on one end, Sanders on the other end, and the voters are still disillusioned with the status quo. And those who are disillusioned with Trump, I think, would more be likely turning to Biden, to Sanders, than to Biden, because it's an anti-establishment mood that began in 2016 and is continuing now.
Well, the other thing that throws a wrinkle into that is the fact that Biden still polls ahead of Trump in the head-to-head matchups, as does Sanders. So I think the incumbent that normally should be enjoying a 4 or 5% cushion in any election like this is not enjoying that this time. He's very tight with any candidate in the Democratic Party. And that shows you that there's a lot of people out there who are still not happy with Trump for promising a lot and delivering very little.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but I don't know if the disillusionment is going to set in strongly enough in time for the election to overthrow Trump. I mean, that remains to be seen. Now, here's another thing. What's going to happen when all this gets to the convention? Will it be a brokered convention? Are they going to steal the nomination from Sanders again, even if he has a plurality but doesn't have enough to get him a first ballot nomination, and then the superdelegates kicked in? And if that happens, won't a lot of people resent it that they're taken away from Sanders again?
Well, that's true. I mean, some of the people who voted for him will feel that way, no doubt. But keep in mind, Sanders is not polling nearly the number of voters that he got in 2016, when there was just he and Hillary running for the nomination. His numbers are substantially lower than they were 4 years ago.
But part of that is a reflection of how many candidates there have been in up until now.
That's true, but what does it tell you about Sanders' base of support? It's not as big as it was 4 years ago. And if it were, he'd still have those numbers.
Yeah, he'd still have the that drawing that support away from the others. Well, that's a good point. But again, what happens when it gets to the convention? What's going to happen at the convention?
Who knows? You know, I think that it all depends on what happens in Super Tuesday primaries and in the primaries that follow that. Don't forget, there's a lot of states that follow Super Tuesday, even though this is a lot of the bulk of the delegates. You know, not the bulk, but a big chunk of them. So I think what you'll run into is voters in states that follow Super Tuesday are going to take a look at the results from those states and say, well, you know, I like this guy, or do I like this guy? Can this guy win? You know, and we've seen none of that yet.
What about the Bloomberg factor from here on in?
Well, he's going to stay in. He said no matter what he does on Super Tuesday, he's going to be there, and he's got the money to stay. The only question is whether he can get on the ballot in all these states in terms of support in the polls.
Who, who will he be, who will he be taking votes away from, Sanders or Biden?
My guess is Sanders, because he's another outsider too. I don't think a vote for Bloomberg is correlatable to a vote for Biden. I don't see any crossover there at all.
And Warren, you expect to stay in?
If she doesn't take her home state of Massachusetts, how can she possibly make a case for voters nationwide? That doesn't make any sense.
Do you see her as anybody's vice presidential nominee?
Well, I mean, Sanders has already said it's not going to be an old white guy. He said that the last time somebody interviewed him on one of the debate stages, and I don't know who he's going to pick. I think Biden will probably pick a woman. That's just my hunch.
But not Warren. But not Warren.
I tend to doubt that. The two of them were pretty animated and scrappy the last time they went at it on stage, and some of that I think is going to spill over into real life, even in the political fortunes of trying to choose a candidate.
Well, we're going to find out on Tuesday how it's going to shake out from there, and Tuesday is going to be Super Tuesday will be very telling. So we'll talk to you then after the results of Super Tuesday.
All righty.
Bryant Thomas, longtime AP newsman, most recently of the Washington Bureau. Thanks for being with us once again.
Okay.